Quincy, thank you so much for that very nice introduction. And to our opening prayer, Mr. Williams, thank you, really. That was very moving. And Rabbi Saperstein, very wise, good words and passionate words. Thank you so much for that. And I always pay homage to Fred, who's the ultimate font of all our wisdom here when it comes to all of these very important issues that we are here today on. We live in a country, and excuse me a little bit of a cold, but I'm doing fine. We live in a country where church and state are separate. And that is a good thing. The founders understood both that government should not be ruled by a religion, which would lead to attacks on other faiths. And they understood the imperative of religious tolerance, that everyone should be able to worship or not in their own way, free of persecution. That said, it's important that everyone participate in the democratic process. It's important that as people of faith, you put forward your values in that process. And I know that you are, especially in reading your covenant, that is part of what I educated myself on today. Christianity teaches to love one's neighbor. Judaism teaches takum olam, acts of kindness to repair the world. Islam teaches giving to the poor. And our history is full of examples of religious people leading righteous reform movements. The civil rights movement in our country came from African American churches and included Jewish and Islamic activists and other faith leaders as well. I think it is time for another movement. If we look at public opinion polls, there's no doubt that the American people are losing faith in our democracy. The American people don't believe that their representatives are fighting for the common good. They believe politicians are being bought by wealthy individuals, big corporations, and special interests. They don't believe the voices of average Americans count. I've been in around politics my entire life, and I've held elective office for almost 30 years. I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but we need an alarm to sound. Our democracy is in crisis. I've seen firsthand the corrosive influence that big money is having on our political system. The influx of unlimited contributions and secret donations into campaigns has fueled the hyper-partisanship we see across the nation, and in Congress in particular. Special interests try to dominate the political agenda to the detriment of the common good. This undercuts the fundamental values that should define our work here in the Congress. Values that faith communities like yours hold dear and support. Values like social justice, feeding the hungry, helping the poor, making peace, and caring for our earth. And I was today reminded, coming over here, the children are in the streets. And I'm paraphrasing Isaiah 16, Isaiah 6, where it said, the children shall lead us. And I was very moved by this movement that we see from around the world. There is an increasing disconnect between what people in our democracy want and what Congress is giving them. People want action on climate change. That's what these children are doing out in the streets. They want universal, affordable health care, economic justice and food security for families, common sense gun safety laws, humane treatment of immigrants. I see that particularly on the border in my home state of New Mexico. This is what I hear all the time in public opinion, and it's in public opinion polls. It's when I go back home. That's what people say they want from Congress, and you know that they aren't getting it. These are issues on your agenda that are not being addressed also. And there is a direct link between Congress's inaction on these issues and our broken campaign finance system and the barriers to the ballot. We live in a representative democracy, but Congress is not representing the people. The 1% are heard, the 99% are not. I've been working for years on reforms to make our democracy work like it should. Democratic reforms that put an end to the influence of secret money in elections, increase access to the ballot box, and raise the ethical bar in government. These principles are consistent with those in restoring the voters' covenant, which, as I said, I read before I came, which you all have adopted. I've introduced legislation, the Democracy for All Amendment. And I want to thank Congressman Sarbanes. He did a brilliant job working with the Speaker and all of the representatives in the House and all of the groups out there to present us with H.R. 1, which is passed the House and is over in the Senate, and we call it in the Senate the For the People Act, or the Democracy for the People Act. And I've introduced legislation also, the Democracy for All Amendment, to begin the process to amend the Constitution to overturn Citizens United and other Supreme Court decisions that Rabbi Saperstein told us about, starting back with Buckley versus Vallejo, which really talked about money and speech being equal to each other, and you had to connect the two together. And that's where we really started going off the rails, all the way back there in the 70s. We need to put an end to the idea that money equals free speech and that corporations are people. Amen. And rein in the out-of-control campaign finance system. Many of you know I'm not running for re-election this next term, but did you know how much money? I looked at this before I decided I would have to raise. $15 million. That's obscene. Instead, I'm working on the Democracy for All Amendment and the For the People Act to put a cap on these obscene amounts of money. I've also introduced this For the People Act. The bill requires disclosure of campaign contributors to shine a light on secret campaign contributions and to empower small donors. We can have a system, and across the country, localities and states are trying to give small donors and the little people the power and the voice out there. The For the People Act makes it easier to register, to vote, and to vote. And it would put into law much of what is proposed in the Restoring the Voters Covenant. The bill promotes automatic voter registration, provides online and same-day registration, and expands early and absentee voting. Our democracy cannot be fully realized unless we all vote. Political gerrymandering is a big problem. You all see that every day. Politicians pick their voters, not the other way around. The Supreme Court has just green-lighted political gerrymandering. So it's up to Congress to do something about it. The For the People Act requires independent redistricting committees to take the politics out of the House of Representatives districts. And the bill demands accountability and ethical conduct from public officials by tightening rules on lobbyists and foreign agents and slowing the special interest revolving door. The For the People Act passed out of the House of Representatives and lies under a pile of dust on the majority leader's desk. And we all need to get that dust off of it, get it on the floor, let the Senate work its will, and move us to a situation where we can start restoring the trust. I mean, my belief in all the things that we have talked about here today, of the direction we want to head, in your covenant where we want to go, require us to first make the reforms and then restore the trust by taking actions on the things people care about. So we need to do these reforms and then action on our priorities. Let's make these changes together. Thank you very much.